Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the bill be now agreed to in principle. I call the member for Baulkham Hills.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be standing here on behalf of the coalition government to be promoting this particular piece of legislation. But I must say, Madam Speaker, saying at the outset, as a club director of the Castle Hill RSL Club, which has recently acquired the Parramatta RSL Club, I certainly have an in-depth knowledge of the club industry. And hearing the rhetoric from the last two speakers from the government, Madam Speaker, particularly the member for Cabramatta, the opposition, member for Cabramatta, I would hate to see, if they're friends of the club movement, I'd hate to see what the enemy of the club movement is going to do. Because quite frankly, Madam Speaker, anybody that would oppose this particular piece of legislation is not a friend of the club movement. Anybody who criticises the intent, you might as well, Madam Speaker, the member for Cabramatta just interjected that he's not opposing it. Well, I would be interested to show pieces of his particular address to the Parliament to members of the club fraternity and ask them if they think that they're supporting the club movement. Because the tone that's coming from the opposition benches over the course of this legislation is nothing short of critical of the club movement. I don't know why they hate the club movement. What has the club movement done to the Labor Party that makes them hate them so much? Why are they introducing mandatory pre-commitment in Canberra, which, as we all know on this side of the bench, because this side of the dispatch table, because we are in tune with our community, we know how devastating that's going to be, Madam Speaker, to the club movement. And I'll come to the reasons why that's going to be devastating to the club movement in a minute. But for some strange reason, ever since Michael Egan got his hands on the Treasury benches, the Labor Party has turned on the club movement. The club movement that gave the Labor Party so many donations through the Revesby Workers Club, through Blacktown Workers Club, through the Randwick Labor Club, through so many clubs around New South Wales which financially supported the Workers Club down in the Tradies Club down in the Sutherland Shire. So much has been received by the Labor Party from the club movement that their criticism and their opposition to the club movement here in New South Wales and in Canberra is breathtaking. If they're friends of the club movement, Madam Acting Speaker, I would hate to see what they would do to those institutions in this great state that they're opposed to. But Madam Speaker, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I am indeed a club director and I'm very, very proud to be a director of the Castle Hill RSL Club. The Castle Hill RSL Club is a club in my electorate, that services my electorate just across the border on the northern side of Showground Road and in the member for Castle Hill's electorate. The Castle Hill RSL Club is a shining example of what a club should do for the community. Madam Acting Speaker, the Castle Hill RSL gives over $700,000 a year to the people of the Hills District. We support everything from Legacy to Meals on Wheels. We support everything from the Scouts and the Guides to Hear the Children charities in my electorate. We support everything from the Lancers Association and the War Veterans, the War Widows. We certainly supply a number of war widows with their Christmas hampers every year. It is a beacon, a shining beacon of what the club movement should be doing for its community. But do you know why the Labor Party hates that? The member for Upper Hunter, the Minister for Gaming, knows exactly why. The club movement, a very good minister, but he worked it out a long time ago when he was first involved in this portfolio, Madam Speaker. The Labor Party hate the club movement because it is the community giving support to its own people. They want the community to only receive from Big Brother. They only want the community to receive money from the government, so that the government can stand up there and say, listen, look how gracious we are. We might be collecting taxes over and beyond the call of duty, above and beyond what certainly taxpayers can make, but we will certainly give it back to those people who support us. They hate the club movement because the club movement collects the money from the government collects money from the community through gaming machines and other services that it might provide to the community, and then it gives the money back to the community. It takes the government out of the equation, and the Labor Party hates anything that's going to take the government out of the equation. Madam Acting Speaker, my electorate of Baulkham Hills have a number of very, very prominent clubs, and my office has spoken to them recently, and I certainly have regular communication with them, as I mentioned, in my capacity as a director. What the Labor Party are criticising in this legislation is going to be make a fantastic contribution in my electorate. The Baulkham Hills Sports Club, which, Madam Speaker, is so focused on junior sport, provides and will increase the number of meeting rooms made available to the community and the servicing of those meeting rooms. It will certainly be promoting and supporting Probus in my electorate, which provides a great deal of support to individuals in my area. But unfortunately, it's had to knock back various requests for grants in recent years. So with this new legislation, what the Minister for Gaming has said to the club movement, we are going to free up some of those funds. You're not going to have to send it to Macquarie Street. You're not going to have to pay some of these funds into taxes. You're going to be able to retain them and certainly give them more accountability to the community by supporting these various community groups. Castle Hill RSL Club, which as I mentioned before, will see this tax break provide a great deal of support to various areas in the community. We believe in the Castle Hill RSL Club that any extra support that we get from the government by way of tax relief should go back to the community. And I can speak in that matter as a director. But we get 30 or 40 applications per month for funding. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of requests. 40 applications per month, nearly 500 a year. 500 times a year, our particular board needs to make a request on whether or not an individual organisation or institution gets supported. Unfortunately, up to 20% are just completely rejected, not necessarily because they lack merit, because we don't have the money. So with this legislation, the Minister for Gaming and Racing has said to our club, we're now going to release some of that funding and you can support all of those worthwhile organisations. At Northmead Bowling Club, which has been a fantastic institution in my electorate there on Windsor Road at Northmead, they actually provide assistance to 2 disabled bowlers. Now, by providing this tax break, the government is going to allow the Northmead Bowling Club to increase that support to these disabled bowlers. They are club members who need to renovate their home to assist in their day-to-day life, their livelihood, that's been forced upon them because of their disability. So they'd like to provide more support to that effect. Now, this legislation, which the opposition criticises because they seem to think that it's money that the government should be collecting in taxes, this legislation is going to allow clubs like the Northmead Bowling Club to release funds and to provide support to disabled people. Madam Speaker, you won't be surprised that there are so many people on this side of the House that are keen to speak on this legislation. It was an election commitment that I was privy to on the 10th of October up there in Tweed Heads at the Club's New South Wales conference. It is an election commitment that wasn't made on the run, like so many election commitments we see from the Labor Party. It was an election commitment that I know the Minister for Gaming and Racing, a member for Upper Hunter, had been discussing with the industry for a long time. He walked around New South Wales, like so many of us on our side of the House did during the election campaign, and saw how many of these small regional clubs and small suburban clubs were in crisis. We have seen unprecedented, under the Labor Party, unprecedented numbers of clubs forced to either close or amalgamate. Unprecedented. The unique nature of clubs in New South Wales over the course of the last 100 years has meant that we've got a fantastic institution which the government is excluded from. That's what the Labor Party hates. They hate the fact that the government is excluded from this particular institution. The Minister for Gaming and Racing saw that these clubs were in absolute crisis, and without the club in small country towns and small, certainly suburban areas in Western Sydney, we deny ourselves a viable employer. We deny ourselves a viable business. Suppliers to these clubs are denied of a good client. And without those clubs, as I've mentioned before, and I know that the other speakers from our side of the House will be mentioning, Madam Speaker, to you ad nauseum, I suspect, without those clubs, there are charities and community organisations that will be denied funding. Now, I want to know from the Labor Party, if they are so opposed to this tax break, if they are so opposed to it, they should tell the Minister for Gaming and Racing how they're going to fund the shortfall that would come if we denied clubs this tax break. How they're going to employ the thousands of people that will probably be losing their jobs if this tax break isn't provided to the club industry. Madam Speaker, I'm proud to be a club director. My wife and I are interdependent with the club movement in our electorate. Our sons play in sport that is supported by the club. We are involved in various charities like St John Ambulance and Life Education, which are reliant on donations and grants from the club movement, and I'm delighted to hear the member for Kiera supports St John Ambulance, and I know that he's agreed to be a member of the Parliamentary Friends of St John Ambulance, and I certainly commend his support of that fine institution.
What about the Liberals? Are you going to join?
Well, I'd love to see the member for Kiera on the Liberal side, as the member for Orange has mentioned. I think that he'd make a fine contribution, but I suspect that if he left the opposition benches, Madam Speaker, I think the average intellectual value of that organisation would drop significantly. So let's keep him over there so that we have at least.
I just said very lonely.
Madam Speaker, in
it's their entire gene pool in one seat.
Madam Speaker, I commend the legislation to the House. Can I also commend the legislation that has been brought to us by the Minister for Gaming and Racing? Can I say, Madam Speaker, that the Minister has spent 16 years getting a thorough appreciation of the club movement. He's been waiting a long time to introduce this legislation. He's been waiting a long time to tell the club movement that the government is their friend, particularly since there's been a change of government in the Legislative Assembly of New South Wales. So I commend the legislation, I commend the Minister, and I look forward to more good work from the club movement here in New South Wales. Thank you, David.